The aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic has not only exposed the stark inequalities and power imbalances in our society, but also highlighted the enduring nature of the struggle for workers' rights. The sudden disruptions to labor markets and the new pressures on essential workers may seem like unprecedented challenges, but they are part of a historical pattern. The tactics used by the powerful to resist workers' demands have remained remarkably consistent across the centuries, underscoring the relevance of our historical context to the present day. To understand the current moment, we must look to the past, specifically the aftermath of the Black Death in medieval Europe, by examining how the lords and rulers of that time responded to the sudden empowerment of serfs in the wake of the plague. We can gain insight into how modern corporations, consulting firms, and policymakers are working to preserve their own power and privilege at the expense of workers' dignity and well-being. Hi everyone, this is Florian, the pessimistic historian. In this video essay, we'll embark on a journey through time, exploring the uncanny parallels between the post-plague labor market of the 14th century and the post-pandemic world of today. We'll see how the investor-employer class has always fought to maintain its dominance, and how the worker class has had to struggle for even the most basic rights and protections. Stay tuned for the sequel to this video, or is it? New challenges in the workers' struggle against the manipulated market, where we'll delve deeper into the unique obstacles faced by modern workers in an increasingly complex and globalized economy. The Black Death, which ravaged Europe between 1347 and 1351, claimed the lives of an estimated 30 to 60% of the population in England. This unprecedented loss of life had a profound impact on the labor market, as the severe shortage of workers gave serfs bargaining power they had never experienced before. One of the most significant changes was the increased mobility of the workforce, which would have far-reaching consequences for the feudal system. This starkly illustrates how a catastrophic event like the Black Death can disrupt established power structures and create opportunities for the marginalized. Before the plague, serfs were tied to the land and their lord, with no freedom of movement or ability to seek better opportunities elsewhere. The feudal system was based on the idea that everyone had a fixed place in society, and the concept of social mobility was virtually non-existent. However, the Black Death changed everything. With such a significant portion of the workforce perishing, labor became scarce, and those who survived could demand higher wages, better food, and more time to tend to their own plots of land. Perhaps most importantly, serfs began to realize that they had the option to leave their manor and seek employment elsewhere. This newfound mobility was a radical departure from the traditional feudal order, giving serfs a level of freedom and agency they had never experienced before. Some serfs left their manors to find work in nearby towns or villages, where they could command higher wages and enjoy greater freedoms. Others banded together to negotiate collectively with their lords, using the threat of leaving as leverage in their bargaining. Lords, accustomed to having a compliant and stationary workforce, were alarmed by this new development. They attempted to restrict the movement of serfs through legal measures such as the Statute of Laborers, which imposed harsh penalties on those who left their manors without permission. However, the desire for better wages and working conditions, coupled with the newfound possibility of mobility, led many serfs to take risks and challenge the status quo. The church, which played a significant role in maintaining the social order, also sought to discourage serfs from seeking greater mobility. As most serfs were illiterate, they depended on their local priests for information, news, and guidance. Priests used this influence to reinforce the idea that serfs should remain in their divinely ordained place in society and that seeking to rise above one's station was a sin. Serfs were told that their desire for better treatment and wages was a form of greed and a moral failing, and they were preached to about the value of humility and subservience. Despite these efforts to suppress their newfound bargaining power and mobility, serfs continued to resist and fight for their rights. The Statute of Laborers and other measures did limit wage increases and restrict labor mobility to some extent. Still, the Black Death's impact on the labor market was not entirely reversed. Estimates suggest that real wages for agricultural laborers increased by 5,100% in the decades following the Black Death, and the overall trend towards the gradual erosion of feudalism continued in the long run. Let's jump forward in history a bit to the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, also known as Wat Tyler's Rebellion or the Great Rising. This significant event demonstrated the growing discontent among the peasantry and their desire for greater freedoms and rights. The revolt was triggered by the imposition of a poll tax, which required every adult to pay a fixed sum regardless of their income, placing a disproportionate burden on the poor. Wat Tyler, a former soldier, emerged as one of the revolt's leaders, along with John Ball and Jack Straw. They mobilized tens of thousands of peasants from Kent and Essex to march on London, demanding an end to serfdom, the right to rent land at a fair price, and the removal of corrupt officials. Although the revolt was ultimately suppressed and its leaders executed, it exposed the feudal system's vulnerability and the peasantry's growing power. The memory of Wat Tyler and the peasants' revolt would continue to inspire future generations of workers in their struggle for rights, dignity, and the freedom to seek better opportunities. The increased mobility of serfs in the aftermath of the Black Death was a critical factor in the gradual breakdown of the feudal system. As more serfs left their manors to find work elsewhere, the traditional ties between lord and serf began to unravel. This process would continue over the centuries as the growth of towns, the rise of commerce, and the spread of education created new opportunities for social and economic advancement. And in the end, the Black Death, while a tragedy of immense proportions, also served as a catalyst for change in the medieval world. By dramatically altering the labor market and introducing the concept of mobility, it set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to the emergence of a more modern, dynamic society. The serfs who survived the plague and fought for their rights played a crucial role in this transformation, and their struggles would echo through the centuries, inspiring future generations in their quest for justice and equality. By the way, if you're someone who likes historical fiction, this particular episode of history inspired Wulfric's storyline in Ken Foll, Its World Without End, a sequel to Pillars of the Earth, set before, during, and after the bubonic plague. I highly recommend streaming the miniseries. It's so rare to see historical fiction really focus on the lower classes. I guess watching peasants toil the fields is less sexy than watching Henry VIII bang his way through 8 wives or whatever softcore dramatizations Showtimes is putting out now. But regardless, Follett's work is consistently well-researched, and Wulfric's story provides an easily digested narrative around these economic power struggles. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, white-collar and tech workers experienced a significant shift in their working conditions, akin to the changing landscape faced by feudal serfs in the aftermath of the Black Death. The sudden and widespread adoption of remote work arrangements brought about a newfound sense of flexibility and mobility for these modern-day workers, mirroring the increased bargaining power and freedom of movement gained by serfs in the post-plague era. As the pandemic forced companies to adapt to a work-from-home model, white-collar and tech employees found themselves liberated from the confines of the traditional office setting. No longer bound by geographic limitations or the need for daily commutes, these workers could enjoy a level of flexibility previously unheard of in their industries. Much like the feudal serfs who gained the ability to relocate and seek better opportunities, modern workers could now choose to live and work from anywhere with a reliable internet connection. This newfound mobility led to a hiring boom and increased wages as companies competed for talent in a suddenly borderless job market. With the ability to work remotely, skilled workers were no longer limited to local job opportunities. They could instead seek out the best offers from companies across the globe. This increased competition for talent put upward pressure on wages and benefits as employers sought to attract and retain top performers. However, just as the feudal nobility resisted the growing power and demands of the serfs, the modern employer-investor class has taken steps to resist the gains made by workers in the post-COVID landscape. Many employers have pushed for a return to the office, citing concerns about productivity, collaboration, and company culture. In reality, this push is often driven by less altruistic motives. One reason for the resistance to remote work is the significant investment that many companies have made in physical office spaces. With expensive leases and ownership of prime real estate, employers are reluctant to see these investments go to waste. Additionally, the shift to remote work has led to a reduction in the demand for commercial real estate, putting downward pressure on property values and rental income for investors. Another factor driving the return to office push is the desire for increased control and micromanagement of employees. With workers out of sight and operating independently, some managers feel a loss of control and fear that productivity may suffer. This has led to the implementation of invasive monitoring software and the expectation of constant availability, blurring the lines between work and personal life. In some cases, employers have even resorted to reducing headcount by making working conditions unbearable, hoping to drive employees to quit rather than having to lay them off and pay severance. By creating a hostile work environment or revoking remote work privileges, companies can effectively force attrition without incurring the costs and negative publicity associated with layoffs. There is also a theory that the government may be pulling strings behind the scenes to encourage a return to office. With remote work, employees are no longer commuting, leading to a decrease in demand for gasoline and other transportation-related products and services. This shift in consumer behavior could have significant implications for the oil industry and the broader economy. Additionally, the rise of digital nomads working and spending money in other countries represents a potential loss of revenue for the American economy. Finally, employers benefit from their employees feeling powerless and without hope. A workforce that is dependent on its jobs and lacks bargaining power is less likely to demand better wages, benefits, or working conditions. By pushing for a return to the office and limiting workers' flexibility and mobility, employers can maintain a greater degree of control and keep employees in a state of precarity. The messaging surrounding the return to office push often relies on corporate propaganda and the media acting as the mouthpiece for the employer-investor class. In a recent interview, Elon Musk argued that it is entitled for certain workers to work from home if not all workers can do so. This argument, however, is deeply flawed. Different jobs have different requirements, and the ability to work remotely is not a matter of privilege, but rather a function of the nature of the work being performed. Musk's statement is a classic example of the crab mentality, where those who cannot benefit from a particular advantage seek to undermine others' access to it rather than working to expand opportunities for all. The constant messaging in the media and on platforms like LinkedIn about workers being unreasonably attached to remote work is another example of corporate propaganda. These narratives paint workers as entitled and ungrateful while ignoring the very real benefits that remote work has brought to both employees and employers alike. By framing the desire for remote work as a mark of unearned privilege, the employer-investor class seeks to undermine the gains made by workers and maintain the status quo. The negative impacts of this push to return to the office are significant. Workers are again faced with long commutes, reduced flexibility, and increased stress levels. The blurring of work-life boundaries has increased burnout and mental health issues as employees struggle to disconnect from work and find time for personal pursuits. Additionally, the return to the office has disproportionately impacted women and caregivers, who often bear the brunt of household and childcare responsibilities. The role of the media in perpetuating these narratives cannot be overstated. Just as the feudal churches acted as the propaganda arm of the ruling class, today's media outlets often serve the interests of the employer-investor class. By framing the debate around remote work in a way that favors the status quo and undermines worker gains, the media helps to maintain the power imbalance between workers and their employers. The year 2023 has witnessed a sharp decline in hiring within the tech industry and other white-collar sectors despite the seemingly positive job market portrayed by politicians and the media. According to data from layoffs.fyi, over 1,000 tech companies laid off more than 150,000 employees in 2022, and this trend has continued into 2023. Amazon, Meta, and Twitter have significantly reduced their workforce, with Amazon alone cutting 18,000 jobs in January 2023. This stark reality contrasts with the rosy picture presented to the public, raising questions about the intentional and Orwellian nature of this misrepresentation. The psychological and societal impacts of this false veneer are profound. Workers struggling to find employment in their fields are left feeling disheartened and confused as the media continually asserts a thriving job market. This disconnect between the reported low unemployment rates and the actual experiences of job seekers is causing frustration and a loss of trust in both the government and the media. The constant bombardment of positive news about the job market while individuals struggle to secure interviews or job offers creates a sense of gaslighting and further erodes the mental well-being of those affected. One reason for this discrepancy is the inaccuracy of the unemployment statistics released by the government. Politicians often tout the record low unemployment rate of 3.7%, but this metric is misleading. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, only counts people as unemployed if they meet specific criteria. They must be currently available to work and have actively searched for a job in the last 4 weeks. This definition fails to account for those who have given up their job search due to discouragement, family obligations, or other reasons, resulting in an artificially low unemployment rate. Moreover, the data points do not differentiate between full-time and part-time employment, which skews the perception of the job market. As a result, the employment rate appears higher than it truly is, as many individuals laid off from full-time positions are now working multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. This shift towards part-time work not only affects workers' financial stability, but also impacts their access to benefits such as health insurance and retirement plans. Another concerning trend in the current job market is the prevalence of ghost jobs. These are job postings that companies advertise but have no intention of filling. A recent survey by Clarify Capital found that 40% of job seekers have encountered ghost jobs during their search. The sinister reasons behind this practice include maintaining the appearance of growth and stability, collecting resumes for future reference, and even driving web traffic to their sites. This phenomenon further contributes to the frustration and despair felt by job seekers who invest time and effort into applying for positions that never materialize. When faced with the difficulties of finding employment, job candidates are often subjected to gaslighting responses that place the blame solely on their shoulders. Employers and media outlets focus on what the candidate might be doing wrong, such as lacking the necessary skills or not networking effectively, while failing to acknowledge the harsh realities of the current hiring landscape. This narrative shift absolves companies of their responsibility to create jobs and maintain a healthy labor market, instead placing the burden on individuals to navigate an increasingly hostile and uncertain employment environment. The struggles of white-collar workers are not unique. Blue-collar and service industry workers have also faced significant challenges during and after the pandemic. Essential workers, such as those in grocery stores, found themselves at heightened risk during the pandemic, dealing with paranoid and angry customers while working long hours to keep shelves stocked. Despite their sacrifices, these workers have seen little to no improvement in their wages, which have failed to keep pace with the rising cost of living. To illustrate this point, consider the story of my good friend, April. This single mother works as a cashier at a local grocery store. During the pandemic, April faced daily fears of contracting the virus and bringing it home to her children. She endured verbal abuse from customers who refused to wear masks and dealt with the constant stress of managing panic buyers who flooded the store to stockpile goods. Despite her essential role in keeping the community fed, Maria's wages remained stagnant, and she struggled to make ends meet as the cost of living continued to rise. Furthermore, the influx of immigrants through America's permeable southern border has led to increased competition for jobs, further depressing wages in these sectors. Employers have taken advantage of the desperate situation faced by many immigrants, offering lower wages and fewer benefits, knowing that they have little choice but to accept these substandard conditions. The employer-investor class has been reluctant to address these issues, instead perpetuating the narrative that nobody wants to work. This rhetoric ignores the basic economic principle of opportunity cost, which states that for work to be worthwhile, the returns on labor, that is, wages, must match or exceed the costs associated with working, such as childcare, transportation, and the loss of leisure time. When wages fail to keep pace with the rising cost of living, it becomes increasingly difficult for workers to justify the time and effort required to maintain employment. This situation has led to growing frustration and disillusionment among workers across all sectors. Even those who have turned to volunteering as a means of staying engaged in their field are facing difficulties. As a personal anecdote, I'm a software developer with 6 years of experience, who has sought out volunteer opportunities to maintain my skills and contribute to meaningful projects. However, I have found that even in the volunteer space, there is often a wait list or a rigorous selection process due to the high number of individuals seeking these opportunities. The fact that one cannot secure a volunteer position, even when willing to work for free, is a striking testament to the dire state of the current job market. As we've seen, the struggles of workers in the aftermath of the Black Death and the COVID-19 pandemic share many parallels. In both cases, workers have faced immense challenges asserting their rights and securing a fair share of the economic pie. The tactics used by those in power to resist workers' demands, from legal restrictions to ideological propaganda, have shown remarkable consistency across the centuries. The struggles of medieval serfs underscore the enduring nature of the conflict between labor and capital, and the need for ongoing vigilance and solidarity in the face of powerful opposing forces. On the other hand, the fact that the feudal system eventually gave way to new economic forms suggests that change is possible, even if the path is long and arduous. Ultimately, the fate of workers in the post-COVID world remains uncertain. Will the pandemic prove to be a catalyst for a new era of worker empowerment and economic democracy, or will it lead to a further consolidation of power and wealth in the hands of a few? As we grapple with these questions, one thing is clear: the struggle for workers' rights is far from over, and its outcome will shape the future of our economy and society for generations to come. Only time will tell what the next chapter in this age-old story will bring.